Single dad teacher tutored a failing student for free. Her mom turned out to be his new boss. But when he learned why that mother couldn't look him in the eye, the truth shattered his world and turned one act of kindness into the most life-changing lesson of his life. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The September morning dawned crisp and clear as Ethan Cole's alarm buzzed at 6 a.m. He reached over and silenced it quickly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful quiet of the house. Sunlight was just beginning to peek through his bedroom curtains, casting soft shadows on the worn carpet. Ethan sat up slowly, running a hand through his graying hair. His joints protested slightly as he stood. Teaching meant long hours on his feet, and at 45, he felt every minute of it. But there was no time to dwell on that. Liam needed breakfast, and they both needed packed lunches. In the kitchen, Ethan moved with practiced efficiency. He pulled out bread, peanut butter, and jelly, assembling sandwiches with careful attention. Liam liked his crust cut off, just like his mother used to do. The thought brought a familiar ache to Ethan's chest, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on adding apple slices and granola bars to each lunch bag. "Liam," he called up the stairs. "Time to get up, buddy." The sound of shuffling feet and a sleepy groan filtered down from above. Ethan smiled, remembering how he'd been just as reluctant to face early mornings at that age. He turned to the stove, cracking eggs into a pan while toast browned nearby. 10 minutes later, Liam appeared in the kitchen, his dark hair sticking up in all directions. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, sliding into his usual chair at the small kitchen table. "Morning, champ." Ethan placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of his son. "Sleep okay?" Liam nodded, already digging into his breakfast. Ethan watched him for a moment, his heart full. Even on the hardest days, this boy made everything worthwhile. They finished breakfast together, and soon Ethan was ushering Liam into their aging Honda Civic. The drive to Oak Ridge Elementary was short, filled with Liam's chatter about his upcoming science project and the new Pokemon cards his friend Tommy had traded him. "Have a great day," Ethan said as Liam hopped out of the car. "Remember, Mrs. Martinez is picking you up for after-school care today." "I know, Dad." Liam waved before disappearing into the stream of students flooding through the school's front doors. The drive to Lincoln High School gave Ethan time to mentally prepare for his day. He'd been teaching sophomore English for 15 years now, and while he loved his job, some days were more challenging than others. His first period class filed in just as the bell rang. 25 sophomores, most still half asleep, slumped into their desks. As Ethan began discussing their current novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, he noticed Liana Green in the back row. Her dark hair fell forward, obscuring her face as she stared down at her desk, pinned motionless on her blank notebook page. It wasn't the first time he'd noticed her disconnection. Over the past few weeks, Liana had grown increasingly withdrawn. Her last 2 assignments had been incomplete, and she rarely participated in class discussions anymore. "So, what do you think Scout learns about prejudice in this chapter?" Ethan asked the class, walking slowly between the rows of desks. Several hands shot up, but Liana remained still, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself invisible. Throughout the lesson, Ethan kept glancing back at her, concern growing. When the bell rang and students began packing up, he made his decision. "Liana?" he called softly. "Could you stay for a moment?" She hesitated, clutching her books to her chest like a shield. The other students filtered out, leaving them alone in the classroom. "Is everything okay?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice gentle. "I've noticed you seem distracted lately." Liana shifted uncomfortably, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm fine, Mr. Cole. Your last few assignments have been incomplete," he continued carefully. "That's not like you. You've always been one of my strongest writers." She shrugged, still not meeting his gaze. "I've just been busy. If you're having trouble with the material, or if there's something else going on." Ethan paused, trying to find the right words. "I'm here to help, Liana. That's my job." "I said I'm fine," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I go now? I'll be late for my next class." Ethan nodded, watching as she hurried from the room. Something about her demeanor tugged at his heart, a familiar kind of pain he couldn't quite place. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of lessons, meetings, and grading. By the time Ethan picked up Liam from Mrs. Martinez's house and got them both home, evening was settling in. After dinner, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a stack of essays before him, red pen in hand. He tried to focus on his students' analysis of Scout's character development, but his mind kept wandering back to Liana's troubled expression. Liam sat across from him, working on his math homework. The kitchen was quiet except for the scratch of pencil on paper and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. "Dad?" Liam's voice broke the silence. "Hmm?" Ethan looked up from his grading. "Are you lonely?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw the concern in those young eyes that were so like his mother's. A faint smile crossed Ethan's face. "I've got you, kiddo." But as he turned to gaze out the kitchen window, where darkness was settling over their small backyard, Ethan felt the weight of all the things he couldn't say, the empty spaces in their lives, the questions he couldn't answer, the worry that somehow, despite his best efforts, it wasn't enough. He wasn't enough. Lost in thought, he watched as a few early stars began to appear in the darkening sky, twinkling with a distant, unreachable light. The final bell rang through the halls of Franklin High School, setting off the usual chaos of scraping chairs and rushing footsteps. Ethan Cole stood at his desk, methodically gathering worksheets and placing them in his worn leather messenger bag. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beams. He glanced at the empty desks, still arranged in their neat rows. Paper airplanes and forgotten pencils littered the floor, the typical aftermath of a long school day. The classroom clock ticked steadily above the whiteboard, marking time in the growing quiet. Movement at the doorway caught his attention. Liana Green stood there, her slim frame nearly hidden behind the door frame. Her dark hair fell forward, partially obscuring her face, and her fingers nervously played with the strap of her backpack. She took a hesitant step into the room, then stopped. "Mr. Cole?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up from his bag, offering a gentle smile. "Yes, Liana, what can I help you with?" She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her worn sneakers scuffing against the linoleum floor. "I was wondering." She paused, taking a deep breath. I wanted to ask you something." "Come on in," Ethan said, gesturing to the front row of desks. "Have a seat if you'd like." Liana moved forward slowly, perching on the edge of a desk rather than sitting properly in it. Her shoulders hunched forward slightly, as if she were trying to make herself smaller. The afternoon light caught the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her backpack tighter. "I'm really struggling with the class," she finally admitted, her eyes fixed on the floor. "The reading assignments, the essays, all of it. I know my grades are, well, they're not good." Ethan leaned against his desk, his posture deliberately casual to help put her at ease. "I've noticed you're having some difficulties, yes, but I also see potential in your work, Liana. When you do participate, your insights are quite thoughtful." A flash of surprise crossed her face, and she glanced up briefly before looking down again. That's kind of why I'm here." She took another deep breath. "I was wondering if you would consider tutoring me after school?" The request hung in the air between them. Ethan watched as Liana's fingers twisted the fabric of her backpack strap, her knuckles white with tension. "I know I can't pay you," she rushed to add, her words tumbling out faster now. "My mom, we don't have much extra money right now, but I really want to try. I need to bring my grades up, and her voice cracked slightly. "I just need some help." The desperation in her voice struck a chord in Ethan's heart. He thought of Maya, his late wife, and how she used to spend hours after school working with struggling students. She had believed so firmly in never turning away a child who wanted to learn. "The library," Ethan said after a moment. "The public library downtown would be a good place to meet. It's quiet, and they have study rooms we can use." He reached for his planner on the desk. "Would Wednesday afternoons work for you?" Liana's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Really? You'll help me?" "Of course," Ethan replied, his voice warm. "That's what teachers are for, Liana. We want to help you succeed." "Wednesday afternoons would be perfect," she said quickly, as if afraid he might change his mind. "I can take the bus there right after school. How about we start tomorrow, say 3:30? Ethan wrote the appointment in his planner, then tore off a small piece of paper to write down the information for her. "We can meet in the main reading room and find a quiet spot to work." Liana stood up, accepting the paper with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. Thank you so much." For the first time since she'd entered the room, she smiled, a small, tentative thing, but genuine. "You're very welcome. Just bring your textbook and any assignments you're working on, and we'll start there." She nodded eagerly, clutching the paper to her chest as if it were something precious. "I will. I'll be there." She backed toward the door, still smiling. "Thank you again." Ethan watched as she hurried out, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. He finished packing his bag, turned off the classroom lights, and locked the door behind him. The drive home was quiet, just the soft hum of his car's engine and the familiar streets passing by. At a red light, Ethan's thoughts drifted to Maya. She would have known exactly what to do with a student like Liana, how to draw her out of her shell, how to build her confidence. Maya had always had a gift for reaching the kids who needed it most. "You'd have told me to say yes," he said softly into the empty car, a sad smile touching his lips. The light turned green, and he continued his drive home, while memories of Maya's kindness kept him company. The town library stood like a weathered sentinel, its red brick walls warmed by the afternoon sun. Ethan arrived 20 minutes early, parking his truck in the nearly empty lot. He chose a quiet study table near the tall windows, where natural light spilled across the wooden surface. His copy of To Kill a Mockingbird lay before him, its spine cracked and pages dog-eared from years of use in his classroom. He checked his watch again, 3:45 p.m. Pulling out his lesson notes, he remembered how his late wife Sarah used to tutor struggling students. She had a way of making them feel safe, valued. The memory brought a sad smile to his face. At precisely 4 p.m., Liana appeared between the library shelves. Her oversized hoodie seemed to swallow her small frame, and she clutched her backpack straps like a lifeline. Dark circles under her eyes suggested too many sleepless nights. "Hi, Mr. Cole," she said softly, hovering uncertainly near the table. "Hello, Liana. Please, have a seat." He gestured to the chair across from him, keeping his voice gentle and steady. "I thought we could start with Chapter 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird. How does that sound?" She nodded, carefully pulling out her own copy, a new paperback with an unbroken spine. As she opened it, Ethan noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Before we dive in," he said, arranging his notes, "what do you find most challenging about the book?" Liana stared at the pages, her fingers fidgeting with the corner. I just can't seem to follow what's happening sometimes. The words are there, but..." She trailed off, her cheeks flushing. "That's perfectly normal," Ethan assured her. "Let's try something different. Instead of reading silently, we'll take turns reading aloud. Sometimes hearing the words helps us connect with them better." For the next half hour, they traded paragraphs. Ethan noticed how Liana's voice grew stronger when Scout described her brother Jim, how she leaned forward slightly during those passages. When they paused to discuss the text, her responses, though quiet, showed surprising insight. "Scout reminds me of my cousin," she admitted during a brief break. "Always getting into trouble, but meaning well." A loud rumble interrupted their discussion, Liana's stomach. She wrapped her arms around herself, face burning with embarrassment. "You know," Ethan said casually, reaching into his bag, "I always keep extra snacks for long study sessions." He pulled out 2 granola bars, sliding one across the table. "My son says these are the best ones." Liana hesitated, then took the offered snack with a whispered, "Thank you." She ate carefully, taking small bites, but Ethan could see how hungry she was. As they returned to the book, Liana gradually relaxed. Her shoulders loosened, and she began asking questions without prompting. When they reached the end of Chapter 2, Ethan noticed her handwriting had become neater, more confident in her notes. "We just moved back," she said suddenly, while they were packing up. "Mom and me, we used to live here when I was little, but I don't remember much." Ethan nodded encouragingly. "Moving can be tough. How are you settling in?" "It's okay," she shrugged, zipping her backpack. "Mom works a lot, but she tries really hard." Through the library's windows, Ethan saw a car pull into the parking lot, an older model sedan with faded blue paint. "Is that your ride?" Liana nodded, gathering her things. "Thank you, Mr. Cole, for everything." "Same time next week?" he asked, and her small smile was answer enough. He walked her to the car, maintaining a respectful distance. As Liana opened the passenger door, Ethan caught a brief glimpse of movement in the driver's seat, a woman's silhouette, her face turned away. Before he could get a clear look, Liana had climbed in and shut the door. Back in his truck, Ethan started the engine. As the car pulled away, he caught one last fleeting glimpse of the driver, but the setting sun's glare on the windshield obscured her features. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the teacher's lounge as Ethan stirred his coffee, the cheap ceramic mug warming his cold fingers. The morning sunlight filtered through dusty Venetian blinds, casting long striped shadows across the worn linoleum floor that had seen decades of faculty meetings and hurried breakfast breaks. Several teachers huddled around the small round table in the corner, their morning conversations mixing with the persistent gurgle of the ancient coffee maker that had somehow survived 3 different principals and countless budget cuts. The familiar scent of burnt coffee and leftover donuts from yesterday's parent-teacher conference filled the cramped space. Ethan took his usual spot near the window, where he could watch the early morning hustle of students arriving for another day. The ritual of morning coffee had become his anchor, a quiet moment before the chaos of lesson plans and teenage emotions took over. "Did you hear about the new district director?" Sarah Martinez, the chemistry teacher, asked between careful bites of her morning bagel. Cream cheese clung to the corner of her mouth as she leaned forward conspiratorially. "Starting next week, I heard, coming in with all sorts of big plans, apparently." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, taking a careful sip of his coffee and feeling the bitter warmth spread through his chest. "Doctor," Reynolds mentioned it in the staff meeting memo yesterday. "Someone from out of state, right? Supposed to have extensive experience in educational reform." "Seattle, I think." Tom Bradley, the history teacher, chimed in from across the table. He leaned back in his metal folding chair, which creaked ominously under his considerable weight. His tie was already askew, and it wasn't even 8 o'clock yet. Supposed to be some hotshot administrator with all these fresh ideas about curriculum integration and student engagement metrics. Because that's exactly what we need. Sarah rolled her eyes dramatically, nearly dropping her bagel in the process. More changes from someone who's never actually set foot in our classrooms or dealt with our kids. I bet they've never had to teach chemistry to 30 teenagers in a room with broken ventilation. Tom snorted into his coffee. Or tried to make the Revolutionary War interesting to kids who think history is just something that happened to other people a million years ago. Ethan listened quietly to their familiar complaints, understanding their frustration, but finding himself oddly detached from the conversation. His mind kept drifting to his afternoon tutoring session with Liana Green, the quiet girl with the serious eyes who had become such a regular part of his week. There was something about her that tugged persistently at his teacher's instincts. A familiar shadow in her dark eyes that he couldn't quite place, like a song he'd heard before but couldn't remember the words to. The day passed in its usual rhythm of literature, discussions, and essay reviews, punctuated by the steady tick of the classroom clock and the distant sound of lockers slamming in the hallways. Ethan moved through his classes with practiced ease, discussing symbolism in Harper Lee's work with his junior class and helping his sophomores understand the nuances of character development. Each period brought its own energy, some students eager and engaged, others clearly counting the minutes until lunch or the final bell. When that blessed final bell finally rang at 3:15, echoing through the corridors like a starting gun, Ethan gathered his worn leather satchel and stack of papers that needed grading. He made his way through the emptying hallways toward the library, passing clusters of students heading to after-school activities or hurrying toward the parking lot where buses waited with engines rumbling. The library was a sanctuary of quiet after the day's controlled chaos. Liana was already waiting at their usual table near the back corner, surrounded by tall shelves that created a cozy alcove. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail today, and she seemed less tense than during their previous sessions. Her shoulders weren't quite so rigid, and she actually looked up when he approached instead of keeping her eyes fixed on her notebook. "Hi, Mr. Cole," she said, pulling out her worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird along with her spiral notebook, which was filled with careful handwriting in blue ink. Her voice was soft but steadier than before, carrying less of that brittle quality that had marked their early meetings. "Hello, Liana. Ready to tackle Chapter 3? Ethan settled into the plastic chair across from her, spreading out their study materials on the scarred wooden table. The afternoon light streaming through the tall library windows created a warm glow around their workspace. They worked through the chapter's analysis with methodical care, and Ethan found himself genuinely impressed by how Liana's answers were becoming more detailed and thoughtful, less hesitant and guarded. She was beginning to trust her own insights, her observations about Scout's character showing a maturity that surprised him. As they discussed the complexities of childhood innocence and moral awakening, she began asking questions that went far beyond the basic assignment requirements. "Why do you think Scout doesn't understand what Atticus is really facing?" Liana asked, her pencil tapping thoughtfully against her notebook margin. "I mean, she knows something's wrong, but she can't see the whole picture." "That's an excellent question," Ethan replied, leaning forward with renewed interest. "What do you think? Have you ever been in a situation where you sensed something important was happening, but the adults around you weren't telling you everything?" A shadow crossed Liana's face, and she was quiet for a long moment before answering. Sometimes grown-ups think they're protecting kids by not explaining things, but it just makes everything more confusing. During a natural pause in their discussion, Liana's gaze wandered to the family photo Ethan used as a bookmark, the one of him and Liam at Riverside Park last summer. Their golden retriever Max caught mid-leap as he chased a frisbee. Liam's gap-toothed grin was front and center, his sandy hair tousled by the wind, pure joy radiating from his small face. "Your son looks really happy," she said, her fingers fidgeting with the corner of her notebook in a gesture that was becoming familiar to him. There was something wistful in her voice that made him look at her more closely. "How old is he?" Ethan's face softened automatically, the way it always did when anyone mentioned Liam. "Liam's 10. He's in 5th grade at Roosevelt Elementary, just down the street from here. Mrs. Patterson's class. She's wonderful with the kids." "Does he like school?" Liana's question seemed casual enough, but there was an underlying curiosity in her tone that suggested the answer mattered more than she was letting on. "Most days?" Ethan chuckled, remembering that morning's minor drama about a forgotten science project. "Though I suspect he'd rather spend his time playing soccer with his friends or building elaborate worlds in that video game he's obsessed with. Minecraft, I think it's called. He's always showing me these incredible structures he's built." Liana nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on the photo with an intensity that made something stir uneasily in Ethan's chest. After a moment's hesitation, she asked, "Were you ever married?" The question caught him completely off guard, though he tried not to show it. Personal questions from students weren't unusual, but something about the way Liana asked, the careful neutrality of her tone, made him pause. He maintained his gentle smile, though it took on a wistful edge as memories flickered through his mind. "Yes, I was. Her name was Sarah." He paused, his fingers unconsciously moving to touch his empty ring finger, a habit he'd never quite broken, even 3 years after finally removing his wedding band. "She passed away when Liam was 3. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Liana whispered, and the genuine empathy in her voice was so raw and immediate that it caught him off guard. It was the kind of understanding that came from personal experience with loss, not just polite sympathy. "Thank you," Ethan replied softly, his throat tightening slightly, the way it still did sometimes when he talked about Sarah. She was an amazing person, taught 3rd grade at Elmwood Elementary across town. She had this incredible gift for connecting with kids who were struggling. Could always tell when someone needed extra attention or just a kind word at exactly the right moment. The kids adored her. As he spoke, painting the picture of the woman who had been his everything, he noticed Liana's eyes fill with a quiet pain that seemed disproportionate to their conversation. Her shoulders tensed slightly, and she looked down at her book as if the words on the page had suddenly become the most important thing in the world. Her fingers traced the text margins without actually reading, a nervous gesture that spoke of thoughts too big and complicated for a 15-year-old to carry alone. "That must have been really hard," she said, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the library's ventilation system. "Losing someone like that, someone so important." "It was," Ethan agreed, studying her face with growing concern. "Still is, sometimes. Grief isn't something you get over. You just learn to carry it differently. But Liam helps me remember all the good things, all the joy Sarah brought into our lives. And teaching, that helps too. There's something healing about helping other people discover their own strength." They returned to their lesson after that, but something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere between them. Liana seemed both more present and more distant somehow, as if wrestling with thoughts and emotions she couldn't or wouldn't share. Her answers remained thoughtful, but there was a distracted quality to them now, as though part of her mind was somewhere else entirely. As their session drew to a close and the late afternoon sun began to slant more sharply through the tall library windows, they packed up their books in what felt like companionable silence. But Ethan sensed undercurrents he couldn't identify, questions hanging in the air that hadn't been asked. Liana shouldered her worn backpack, adjusting the straps with the careful precision of someone buying time. She hesitated by the edge of their table, seeming to gather courage for something. The late afternoon light streaming through the windows caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair and cast long shadows across the library carpet, creating an almost ethereal quality to the moment. "Thanks, Mr. Cole," she said finally, her voice carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for such simple words. "For everything, for being patient with me." Then, almost as an afterthought, though something in her tone suggested it was anything but, she added softly, "My mom gets really nervous around schools and teachers and stuff like that. She had some bad experiences when she was younger, but I think you used to know her. Maya Green? Before she was green, I mean. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Maya. The name echoed in his mind, bringing with it a flood of memories he'd buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself they were from someone else's life. Maya Chin from college, with her infectious laugh and fierce intelligence, her dreams of changing the world through education. Maya, who had disappeared from his life 16 years ago without explanation, leaving only questions and a hole in his heart that Sarah had eventually filled. Before Ethan could process her words fully, before he could form any kind of coherent response, Liana had turned and was walking quickly toward the library exit. Her footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor, growing fainter with each step. He looked up sharply, half rising from his chair, but she was already pushing through the heavy glass doors, leaving him standing alone among the towering shelves with their thousands of stories, her words echoing in his mind like thunder after lightning. Maya Green, Maya Chin, and Liana, with her serious dark eyes and quiet intelligence, her questions about marriage and family, her mother, who got nervous around schools. Ethan sank back into his chair, his hand shaking slightly as the implications began to crash over him like waves against a crumbling seawall. Monday morning arrived with an electric buzz in the hallways of Harrison High. Teachers gathered in small clusters, their voices a mix of curiosity and speculation about the new director of curriculum. The usual morning drowsiness had been replaced by an air of anticipation. Ethan stood at his classroom doorway, greeting students as they filtered in. His worn leather messenger bag sat on his desk, stuffed with essays he'd graded over the weekend. The familiar scent of chalk dust and old books usually brought him comfort, but today the air felt different, heavier somehow. "Did you see her yet, Mr. Cole?" Jessica Thompson asked as she walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "The new director? Mrs. Peterson says she comes from some fancy school in Boston." "Not yet," Ethan replied with a small smile, checking his watch. The morning bell would ring in 5 minutes. He moved to the whiteboard, writing out the day's agenda in his neat handwriting. The squeak of the marker against the smooth surface helped ground him, a familiar routine in the face of change. Behind him, students continued to file in, their chatter filling the room with the usual Monday morning energy. The bell rang, and Ethan turned to face his class. "Good morning, everyone. Let's start with..." The door opened. Time seemed to freeze as Maya Green stepped into his classroom. She wore a navy blazer and pencil skirt, her dark hair shorter than he remembered, but still falling in those familiar waves. Their eyes met, and 20 years vanished in an instant. Maya's professional smile faltered for just a moment, so briefly that anyone else might have missed it. But Ethan saw it. He'd once known every expression that crossed that face. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady and controlled. "I'm Maya Green, your new director of curriculum. I'll be observing classes throughout the week to get a better understanding of our programs." Ethan's throat felt dry. "Welcome to Harrison High, Miss Green." The formality of the words felt strange on his tongue. "We're just starting our unit on Shakespeare's Macbeth." Maya nodded, taking a seat in the back corner of the classroom. She pulled out a tablet, her movements precise and measured, professional, distant. Ethan turned back to the board, grateful for something to focus on. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote out the day's writing prompt. The familiar words of Shakespeare seemed to swim before his eyes. "Today we'll be exploring the theme of ambition," he managed, his teacher's voice taking over on autopilot. "Can anyone recall from our previous discussion how ambition drives Macbeth's actions?" Several hands shot up, but Ethan noticed Liana's eyes darting between him and Maya, a shadow of understanding crossing her face. Of course, she must have known. That's what she'd been trying to tell him. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur. Ethan guided the class discussion, asking questions, encouraging participation, all while acutely aware of Maya's presence. The scratch of her stylus against the tablet screen seemed to echo in his ears. He caught himself stumbling over words he'd taught 100 times before. Each time he turned to write on the board, he could feel Maya's eyes on him, calculating, assessing. Was she thinking about their last conversation, the promises they'd made, the ones they'd broken? When the bell finally rang, students gathered their things and filed out. Maya stood, straightening her blazer. "Thank you for allowing me to observe, Mr. Cole," she said, her professional mask firmly in place. "Your students seem very engaged." "Thank you, Miss Green." He cleared his throat. "I hope you found the class informative." A heavy pause hung between them, weighted with 2 decades of unspoken words. Maya's fingers tightened around her tablet. "It was good to see you, Ethan," she said quietly. then turned and walked out of the classroom before he could respond. Ethan sat heavily in his chair, letting out a long breath. The empty classroom felt too large, too quiet. His next class wouldn't arrive for 15 minutes, and he was grateful for the reprieve. The rest of the day passed in a fog. He taught his classes, met with students, attended a department meeting, all while feeling slightly disconnected, as if watching himself from a distance. Maya's presence in the school building felt like a constant pressure on his chest, even when she wasn't in sight. That evening, after putting Liam to bed, Ethan found himself pulling out an old shoebox from the back of his closet. Dust had settled on the lid, and the corners were worn soft with age. Inside, beneath old letters and ticket stubs, he found what he was looking for, a slightly faded photograph. Two young people smiled up at him from a checkered blanket, a half-eaten picnic spread out before them. The autumn leaves behind them blazed orange and red against a bright blue sky. Maya's head rested on his shoulder, her laugh caught mid-moment by the camera. His younger self looked at her with unguarded joy, no idea of what lay ahead. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, the photograph trembling slightly in his hands. 20 years. 20 years of building a life, loving and losing Sarah, raising Liam, teaching countless students. And now here was Maya, walking back into his classroom as if stepping out of his memories. The silence of the house pressed in around him as questions he'd thought long buried rose to the surface. Why had she really left? What had happened to her dreams of becoming a writer? And why had she come back now, of all times? He sat there for a long time, the old photograph in his hands, while the night grew deeper around him. The September sunlight slanted through the library's tall windows, casting long shadows across the wooden tables. Ethan sat in their usual spot, arranging his teaching materials with methodical precision. His hands moved automatically while his mind wandered, remembering yesterday's encounter with Maya. He checked his watch again, 3:45 p.m. Liana would arrive any minute. The familiar rhythm of tutoring sessions had become a comfort over the past weeks, but today felt different. Everything felt different since Maya had walked into his classroom. The sound of approaching footsteps made him look up. Liana walked toward him, her backpack bouncing slightly against her shoulder. There was something lighter in her step today, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Hi, Mr. Cole," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Hello, Liana." He managed a warm smile, pushing his personal turmoil aside. "Ready to tackle that essay outline?" She nodded, pulling out her notebook. The afternoon sun caught her profile, and Ethan felt his breath catch. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, it was exactly like Maya used to do. They worked through the outline methodically, discussing theme development and character motivation in To Kill a Mockingbird. Liana seemed more engaged than usual, her responses coming quickly and confidently. "Mom says you were always good at finding the deeper meaning in books," she said casually, not looking up from her paper. Ethan's pen paused mid-sentence. "Did she?" "Mm-hmm." Liana continued writing. "She told me you were really smart in college, really idealistic too." She glanced up at him. "That means you believed in making things better, right?" "That's right." His throat felt dry. "Your mom and I. We knew each other pretty well back then." Liana's pencil moved across the paper, her handwriting neat and careful, just like Maya's. "She talks about you sometimes. Not a lot, but..." She trailed off, erasing something with careful strokes. The library hummed with quiet activity around them. A cart of books squeaked past, pushed by an elderly volunteer. Somewhere, a phone vibrated briefly. "Mr. Cole?" Liana's voice had grown, softer. "Yes?" She set down her pencil, still not meeting his eyes. Her fingers played with the corner of her notebook, folding and unfolding the paper. "Mommy says." She took a deep breath. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Ethan's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The afternoon sun suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. "What?" He had to clear his throat. "What exactly did your mom tell you?" "What?" But Liana had already picked up her pencil again, her face turned down to her work. "This theme statement, is it specific enough? I want to focus on Scout's relationship with Atticus." Ethan's mind raced. 15 years. Liana was 15. The timing. Maya had left in their senior year of college, just disappeared one day with only a brief note saying she needed space. He'd tried to find her, but she'd changed her number, and her family wouldn't tell him anything. "Liana," he said gently, "we should talk about what you just said. The theme statement?" Her voice wavered slightly. No, about what your mom told you. She shook her head, her hair falling forward to hide her face. I shouldn't have said anything. Can we just work on the essay? Ethan watched her, saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand trembled slightly as she wrote. She was scared, he realized, just as scared as he was. Of course, he said softly. Let's look at that theme statement. They continued working, but everything had changed. Every movement, every word seemed to carry new weight. Ethan noticed things he'd somehow missed before. The shape of her nose, the determined set of her jaw when she concentrated. How had he not seen it? The session ended at its usual time. Liana packed up quickly, her movements jerky and uncertain. Same time Thursday? She asked, not quite meeting his eyes. Yes, he managed. Same time Thursday. She nodded and hurried away, leaving Ethan sitting alone at the table, surrounded by half-graded papers and the weight of revelation. The drive home passed in a blur. He helped Liam with homework, made dinner, went through their evening routine, but his mind kept circling back to Liana's words, to Maya's sudden reappearance, to all the years that had slipped away. Later, after Liam was asleep, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked and settled around him. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting strange shadows on the walls. His thoughts wouldn't quiet. A daughter. He had a daughter. Every interaction with Liana played through his mind in new context. Her quiet determination, her love of books, the way she'd asked about his life, about his marriage to Sarah, about Liam. Had she been trying to understand her own story all along? And Maya, how could she have kept this from him? 15 years of birthdays, first days of school, scraped knees and bedtime stories, all those moments he should have been there for, gone forever. The digital clock on his nightstand marked the slow passage of hours. 11:47, 12:23, 1:15. At 2:03 a.m., he reached for his phone. The screen's harsh light made him squint as he pulled up Maya's contact information, added just yesterday for professional purposes. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Finally, he typed 5 simple words. We need to talk. Tomorrow, after school. He pressed send before he could second-guess himself. The message whooshed away into the darkness, and Ethan lay back, his heart pounding. There would be no more sleep tonight. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty school parking lot. Ethan leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching the last few cars leave. His heart pounded against his ribs as he waited. The revelation from yesterday's tutoring session echoed in his mind. Mommy says you're my daddy. Maya's silver sedan pulled into the lot, parking several spaces away. She stepped out, clutching her leather portfolio like a shield. Her heels clicked against the asphalt as she approached, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the slight tremor in her hands. We should talk somewhere private, she said, gesturing to a secluded corner near the old oak tree. Ethan followed her, maintaining a careful distance. The familiar scent of her perfume brought back a flood of memories he'd spent years trying to forget. When they reached the shade of the oak, he turned to face her. Is it true? His voice was barely above a whisper. Is Liana my daughter? Maya's composed facade cracked. She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together. Yes, she said softly. She is. The word hit Ethan like a physical blow. He stumbled back a step, bracing himself against the rough bark of the tree. 15 years, he managed. You kept this from me for 15 years? I was scared, Ethan. Maya's voice shook. We were so young. You had such big dreams, teaching, writing, changing lives. I couldn't bear to be the one who held you back. Hold me back? Anger flared in his chest, hot and sharp. That wasn't your choice to make, Maya. That was my child too, my daughter. I know that now. Tears welled in her eyes. I made a terrible mistake. I was 19, pregnant, and terrified. My parents were pushing me to focus on my career, and I convinced myself I was doing what was best for everyone. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, pacing in tight circles. Best for everyone? I lost 15 years with my daughter. 15 years of birthdays, first days of school, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. How was that best for anyone? I'm sorry, Maya whispered. I wanted to tell you so many times, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. And then I heard about your wife, how happy you were. Don't. Ethan's voice was sharp. Don't bring Sarah into this. She would have loved Liana. She would have been an amazing stepmother. His throat tightened. And now she's gone, and I find out I had a daughter all along? Maya wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. Liana started asking questions about her father when she was little. I told her small things at first, that you were kind, smart, that you loved books. As she got older, she wanted to know more. When this job opened up, and I saw your name on the faculty list, she took a shaky breath. Maybe part of me wanted her to meet you, even if I wasn't brave enough to tell you myself. Ethan stared at her, seeing fragments of Liana in her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her chin. How had he not noticed before? She has my nose, he said numbly, and she holds her pencil the same way I do, all this time. She's so much like you, Maya said softly. The way she loses herself in books, how she cares about everyone's feelings. She even has your terrible handwriting. The comment, which might have once made them both laugh, now felt like another knife to his heart. All these small details about his daughter, discoveries he should have made years ago, stolen from him. I can't. Ethan's voice cracked. I can't do this right now. He turned away, his vision blurring. 15 years, Maya. You took 15 years? I can never get back. Ethan, please. But he was already walking away, his footsteps heavy on the asphalt. He couldn't bear to hear any more explanations or apologies. The weight of all those lost years pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. The drive home passed in a blur. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, and he had to pull over once when tears made it impossible to see the road. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed mockingly cheerful. The front door burst open before he reached it. Liam bounded out, waving a piece of paper. Dad, Dad! Look what I drew in art class today. Ethan caught his son in his arms, lifting him off his feet in a fierce hug. He buried his face in Liam's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo and crayon wax. Dad? Liam's voice was muffled against his shoulder. You're squishing me. Sorry, buddy. Ethan loosened his grip but didn't let go. He could feel tears threatening again and blinked them back. What did you draw for me? Liam pulled back enough to hold up his artwork, a colorful family portrait done in markers. It's us. See? That's you, and that's me. And I even drew Mom as an angel in the sky watching over us. Ethan stared at the simple drawing, at the three figures Liam had created with such love and care. His vision blurred again, and this time he couldn't stop the tears from falling. Dad? Liam's small hand touched his wet cheek. Are you okay? Yeah, kiddo. Ethan hugged him close again. I just love you so much. So much. They stood there in the fading light, father and son holding each other, while the weight of truth and loss settled around them like autumn leaves. The morning bell rang through the hallways of Jefferson High, but Ethan Cole barely heard it. He sat at his desk, staring at the empty classroom before him. His first period students wouldn't arrive for another 15 minutes, and he was grateful for the silence. The events of yesterday still churned in his stomach like bad coffee. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maya's face, heard her confession, and felt the weight of 17 lost years pressing down on his chest. The thought of seeing her in the hallways today made him feel sick. A knock on his classroom door startled him. For a terrible moment, he thought it might be Maya, but instead, Marvin Reynolds' broad frame filled the doorway. The history teacher's weathered face wore its usual expression of calm concern. You look like hell, Cole, Marvin said, stepping inside and closing the door. Ethan managed a weak smile. Thanks for noticing. Saw you bolt out of here yesterday like the building was on fire. Marvin pulled up a student chair, the metal scraping against the floor. Want to talk about it? Ethan rubbed his temples. Not really. Too bad. Marvin sat down, his knees almost touching his chest in the small chair. Because you're going to. The first bell rang, warning students to head to class. Ethan glanced at his watch. I've got students coming. Then give me the short version. Ethan took a deep breath. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth. I have a daughter. Marvin's eyebrows shot up. Come again? Liana Green, my student. The one I've been tutoring. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. She's mine. Maya, her mother, she never told me. 17 years, Marvin. 17 years of not knowing I had a child. Students began filtering past the classroom, their chatter filling the hallway. Marvin leaned forward, his voice low. Meet me for lunch. Teacher's lounge is usually empty 5th period. Throughout his morning classes, Ethan went through the motions. He lectured about symbolism in The Great Gatsby, but his mind kept drifting to Liana's empty seat in 3rd period. She was absent today, and each time he looked at her desk, his chest tightened. When fifth period came, he found Marvin already waiting in the teacher's lounge, 2 cups of coffee on the table. The room smelled of burnt microwave popcorn and old coffee, but at least they were alone. "All right," Marvin said as Ethan sat down. "Let it out." The whole story spilled from Ethan in a rush meeting Maya in college, their relationship, her disappearance, and now this impossible revelation. "I can't even look at her, Marvin. Every time I see Maya in the halls, I want to scream." "And what about the girl?" Marvin asked quietly. Ethan stared into his coffee. "I have tutoring with her this afternoon, but—" He shook his head. "I can't face her either. Not yet." "Can't face her?" Marvin's voice took on an edge Ethan rarely heard. "The same girl who's been waiting for a father her whole life?" "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." Marvin leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Listen, when I was in Afghanistan, I saw kids who'd lost everything. Parents, homes, hope, everything. And you know what they needed most? Someone to show up for them. Just show up." "This is different," Ethan protested. "You're right. This is your daughter." Marvin's voice softened. "Look, you have every right to be angry with Maya. Hell, I'd be furious. But that girl? She's innocent in all this. And right now, she's probably sitting in that library, wondering if her father cares enough to show up." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He glanced at the clock. 3:45? Their tutoring session had started 15 minutes ago. "I get it," Marvin continued. "You're hurt. But you're also the guy who stayed late every day last semester to help Tommy Martinez with his reading when everyone else had given up on him. You're the teacher who brings extra lunches for kids who forget theirs. You show up, Ethan. It's what you do." Ethan's throat felt tight. "I don't know how to be her father." "Then start by being her teacher." Marvin stood up, gathering his empty coffee cup. "The rest will come." The afternoon dragged by in a blur of self-recrimination and doubt. When the final bell rang, Ethan sat at his desk, Marvin's words echoing in his mind. The sun was already low in the sky when he finally grabbed his keys and headed for his truck. The library was due to close in 10 minutes when he pulled into the parking lot. Through the large windows, he could see most of the tables were empty, chairs neatly pushed in. But there, in the far corner where they usually met, sat a solitary figure. Liana hunched over a book, her dark hair falling forward to hide her face. Even from here, Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she kept glancing at the door, waiting, still waiting, after almost 3 hours. His feet felt heavy as he walked through the library doors. The librarian looked up from her desk, about to announce closing time, but something in his expression made her pause. Liana didn't look up as he approached, though he knew she heard his footsteps. When he reached their table, he saw she was staring at the same page of To Kill a Mockingbird they'd discussed in their last session. "I'm sorry," he said softly. She didn't move for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "I thought maybe you didn't want to be my teacher anymore. Because of everything." "No, that's not." Ethan's voice caught. He pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. "I was scared and angry, but not at you. Never at you. Mom said you might need time. Your mom was right about that, but she was wrong about something else." Ethan took a deep breath. "She was wrong to keep us apart for so long. And I was wrong today, letting my anger make me miss this." He gestured to their usual study space. "Make me miss you." Liana's lower lip trembled slightly. "I've missed you my whole life. I just didn't know it until now." The words broke something in Ethan's chest. Without thinking, he opened his arms, and Liana fell into them. She felt small and fragile against him, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He held her close, his own tears falling into her hair. 17 years of absence compressed into this one moment of connection. "I'm here now," he whispered. "I'm here." The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees at Henderson Park, scattering red and golden leaves across the worn wooden bench where Ethan Cole sat waiting. His fingers drummed against his knee as he watched parents pushing strollers and children chasing each other across the playground. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and the air carried the crisp scent of approaching evening. Maya appeared from the parking lot, her professional attire replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. She walked slowly, arms crossed, her shoulders tense. Ethan straightened as she approached, his jaw tight, but his eyes tired. "Thank you for meeting me," Maya said quietly, settling on the far end of the bench. "We need to figure this out," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions beneath. "For Liana's sake." Maya nodded, watching a leaf spiral down between them. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But Liana, she's sensitive. She picks up on everything. I've noticed. Ethan's expression softened slightly. She reminds me of how I was at that age. Always watching, always thinking. She gets that from you, Maya admitted. A hint of warmth breaking through her careful facade, along with her love of books and that little crease between her eyebrows when she's concentrating. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of lost years hanging between them. I want to be part of her life, Ethan said finally. But we need to do this right. No drama, no fighting, just quiet steps forward, Maya released. A breath she seemed to have been holding. I agree. She's been through enough moves, enough changes. She needs stability now. I'll keep tutoring her, Ethan continued. It gives us time together that feels natural, and maybe we can build from there. She'd like that. She talks about your sessions all the time. Maya smiled faintly. Yesterday she told me you explain metaphors using superhero movies. Whatever works. Ethan shrugged, but there was pride in his voice. She's smart. She just needs someone to believe in her. A group of kids ran past, their laughter carrying on the wind. Maya watched them, then turned to face Ethan directly. We should keep this between us for now, she suggested. Let Liana set the pace. She already knows, but she might need time to process everything. Ethan nodded slowly. I agree, though I need to tell my son, Liam. He deserves to know he has a sister. Of course, Maya said softly. How do you think he'll take it? He's a good kid, open-hearted. Ethan's expression warmed, thinking about his son. Actually, he and Liana might get along well. They both love drawing. The next afternoon found Ethan back at the library with Liana, their books spread across the familiar wooden table. But something had shifted in the air between them, like a door quietly opening. So, Ethan said, marking a passage in her essay, you've got strong ideas here. You just need to trust your voice more. Liana glanced up at him, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made his heart ache. What do you mean? Well, look here. He pointed to a paragraph. You're saying something important about the character's choices, but you're kind of hiding behind fancy words. Just tell it straight, like you would if we were talking. She bit her lip, considering. Mom says, I sometimes tried too hard to sound smart. You're already smart, Ethan said gently. You don't need to prove it to anyone. A small smile touched her lips, and she began rewriting the paragraph. Ethan watched her work, seeing echoes of himself in her focused expression. You know, he said carefully, when I was your age, I used to write stories all the time, filled up whole notebooks. Really? Liana looked up, interested. What kind of stories? Oh, all kinds. Adventures, mysteries. He chuckled, mostly about lonely heroes finding their way home. Something flickered in Liana's eyes, and she studied her paper intently. I write sometimes too. Just small things. I'd love to read them sometime, Ethan said softly. If you want to share. She nodded, still not looking up, but her shoulders relaxed slightly. They worked through the rest of the session, Ethan slipping in small encouragements between grammar corrections and plot discussions. When they finished, Liana packed her bag slowly, as if reluctant to leave. Mr. Cole? She said hesitantly. Thanks for coming back yesterday. When you weren't here, I thought maybe. Hey, he interrupted gently. I'm not going anywhere, okay? You can count on that. She gave him a quick, shy smile before hurrying out to where Maya waited in the car. That evening, Ethan sat with Liam at their kitchen table, pizza boxes pushed aside. His son was coloring, humming quietly to himself. Buddy, Ethan said, can we talk about something important? Liam looked up, blue crayon paused mid-stroke. Are we getting a dog? Ethan laughed, despite his nerves. No, not a dog, actually. It's about family. Is Aunt Sarah coming to visit? Liam asked hopefully. No, Ethan took a deep breath. You know how some families are different? How Tommy has 2 moms and Maria lives with her grandparents? Liam nodded, watching his father curiously. Well, I just found out that you have a sister. A big sister named Liana. Liam's eyes widened. I do? Where is she? Why didn't we know before? It's complicated, Ethan said carefully. She lives with her mom, and I didn't know about her until very recently, but she's 15, and she's really nice. She likes to draw, just like you. Can I meet her? Liam asked eagerly. Soon, I hope. We're taking things slow right now, making sure everyone feels comfortable. Ethan studied his son's face. How do you feel about all this? Liam considered for a moment, then smiled. I think it's cool. I always wanted a sister. Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes as he pulled his son into a hug. I think your family just got a little bigger, kiddo. The Monday morning hallways buzzed with the usual chatter as Ethan made his way to his classroom. Something felt different though, like tiny pinpricks on the back of his neck. A group of teachers near the staff room fell silent as he passed, their eyes following him with poorly concealed interest. Ethan kept his head high, clutching his worn leather briefcase closer. Inside his classroom, he arranged the day's handouts with practiced efficiency, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. The familiar space, with its motivational posters and shelves of well-loved books, usually brought him comfort. Today, it felt exposed, like a stage under harsh spotlights. Miss Calloway appeared in his doorway just before first period, her thin frame rigid in her typical charcoal pantsuit. Her lips were pressed into a tight line that Ethan had learned to recognize as trouble brewing. Mr. Cole, do you have a moment? Her voice carried that particular tone of false sweetness that made his stomach tighten. Of course, Patricia. He gestured to one of the student desks. What can I help you with? She remained standing, clipboard pressed against her chest like armor. I couldn't help but notice you've been spending quite a bit of time with Liana Green lately. Ethan kept his face neutral, though his heart picked up speed. Yes, I've been tutoring her in English. She's showing real improvement. Miss Calloway's pen tapped against her clipboard in a steady rhythm. And these sessions are always at the public library? They are. Ethan moved behind his desk, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. It's a proper setting for academic support. I see. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It's just that some of us are concerned about appearances, Ethan. A male teacher spending so much one-on-one time with a female student, even in a public place. Ethan's hand stilled on his desk. He looked up at her, meeting her gaze directly. I appreciate the concern, Patricia, but everything is completely above board. Miss Green, Director Green, is fully aware of the tutoring arrangement. Oh yes, our new director, Miss Calloway's tone sharpened. You two seem familiar with each other. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Ethan took a steady breath, reminding himself to stay professional. Miss Green and I attended the same university. We've known each other professionally for years. How convenient. She made a small note on her clipboard. Well, I just wanted to make sure you're aware of how things might look. Perception is everything in education. Wouldn't you agree? Students began filtering into the classroom, saving Ethan from having to respond. Miss Calloway gave him one last pointed look before clicking her way out the door on her sensible heels. Throughout the day, Ethan noticed the sideways glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. During lunch, he sat alone in his classroom, grading papers and trying not to think about how quickly rumors could spread in a high school, among both students and staff. Liana was quieter than usual in class that afternoon, keeping her eyes down and barely participating. The sight of her hunched shoulders made something in Ethan's chest ache. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, that they'd figure this out, but he couldn't. Not here, not now. After his last class, Principal Martinez stopped by. Ethan, got a minute? Sure, Tom. Ethan's voice remained steady despite his racing thoughts. Just wanted to check in. The principal leaned against a desk. Miss Calloway raised some concerns about your tutoring arrangement with Liana Green. I understand. Ethan met his eyes. But I can assure you everything is completely professional. Director Green has approved it, and we meet only in public spaces. Principal Martinez nodded slowly. I know you're one of our best, Ethan. Just be careful, okay? Schools run on trust, but also on reputation. That evening, Ethan's grocery cart squeaked under the harsh fluorescent lights of Marshall's Market. He mechanically filled it with the usual items: whole wheat bread, peanut butter, apple juice for Liam's lunches. His mind kept circling back to the day's events, to the whispers and stares. As he rounded the corner into the produce section, he nearly collided with another cart. Maya stood there, dark circles under her eyes, visible even under the unflattering store lighting. Her normally perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her designer blazer had been replaced by a worn sweater. Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the careful distance they'd maintained at school fell away. They both saw the same worry reflected in each other's faces. Worry for their daughter, worry about the growing complications, worry about what tomorrow might bring. Maya opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Ethan noticed her cart contained comfort foods, Ice cream, chocolate, potato chips, the kind of things someone might buy when they're struggling to cope. He gave her a small nod, acknowledging their shared burden without words. She returned it, her eyes softening for just a moment before she turned her cart down another aisle, leaving Ethan alone among the stacks of fresh vegetables and fruit. The weight of their secret felt heavier than ever as he watched her go. The simple act of grocery shopping had somehow become yet another reminder of how complicated their lives had become. As he mechanically selected apples for Liam's lunches, Ethan couldn't help but wonder how long they could keep walking this tightrope before something had to give. The autumn sunlight streamed through the classroom windows as Ethan wrote poetry of the heart on the whiteboard in his neat handwriting. His 10th grade English students filed in, some dragging their feet, others chatting quietly among themselves. Liana slipped into her usual seat in the third row, her dark hair falling forward to shield her face. Today, Ethan announced, turning to face the class, we're going to explore how poetry helps us express the deepest truths in our hearts. He picked up a stack of paper from his desk. Your assignment is to write about something that matters to you, something real, something that moves you. A few groans echoed through the room, but Ethan noticed Liana sit up straighter, her eyes brightening with interest. Poetry isn't just about rhyming words, he continued, walking between the rows of desks. It's about capturing feelings that are sometimes too big for ordinary sentences. He paused beside Liana's desk, placing a sheet of paper in front of her. Use whatever style feels right to you. Free verse, haiku, sonnet, the form doesn't matter as much as the feeling behind it. Throughout the class, Ethan watched as his students worked. Some stared at blank pages, others scribbled furiously. Liana remained bent over her desk, her pencil moving steadily across the paper. She didn't look up once, completely absorbed in her writing. When the bell rang, students gathered their things and filed out. Liana lingered, carefully folding her paper before placing it on his desk. Their eyes met briefly before she hurried away, leaving Ethan with a stack of poems to grade. That evening, after dinner with Liam, Ethan settled into his favorite armchair with a cup of coffee and the student poems. He saved Liana's for last, his hands slightly trembling as he unfolded the paper. The title read, Waiting at windows, I press my face against cold glass, watching fathers walk by with their daughters. Their laughter floats up to my window like balloons I can't catch. Every night, I imagine your shadow stretching across our welcome mat, your footsteps on our stairs, your voice calling my name. Mom says you were kind once, that you had dreams as big as mountains. I wonder if I was one of them before I became invisible. I collect father-daughter moments like seashells from a shore I've never seen. Homework, help, and birthday cards, proud smiles at school plays. Now, I see you every day, but you're still just beyond my reach, like those evening stars I wish on, hoping tomorrow will be different. Asterisk, Ethan's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, but the tears kept coming. The raw honesty of Liana's words pierced his heart. All those years of absence, of not knowing, crashed over him like a wave. He reached for his phone and typed a message to Maya, "Can we talk? It's about Liana's poem." 20 minutes later, they met on a bench outside the local coffee shop. The evening air was cool, and Maya wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than usual. "She's always been like this," Maya said softly, after Ethan showed her the poem. "Writing things that break my heart. Since she was little, she'd ask about you, make up stories about where you might be, what you might be doing." She looked down at her hands. Sometimes she'd sit by the window for hours, just watching. I told her you were kind, that you had big dreams. I couldn't bear to tell her I was the one who took her away from those dreams. "All those years," Ethan whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "All those moments we missed." "She used to draw pictures of you," Maya continued. "She'd never seen you, but she'd draw this tall figure holding her hand. She'd tape them to her wall. When she got older, she started writing instead. Poetry, stories, journal entries, all about the father she imagined." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of lost time hanging between them. Back home, Ethan stood in his kitchen, holding Liana's poem. On the refrigerator, Liam's colorful drawings created a bright mosaic. Stick figures playing soccer, a family of 3 holding hands, rockets zooming through crayon stars. With trembling fingers, Ethan carefully placed Liana's poem in the center, securing it with a magnet shaped like a book that his late wife had bought years ago. He stepped back, looking at the refrigerator gallery, his son's joyful artwork and his daughter's heartfelt words side by side. 2 pieces of his heart, finally sharing the same space. His fingers traced the edge of the poem, lingering on the words that spoke of waiting and invisible fathers. The magnitude of what had been lost and what could still be saved settled over him like a quiet prayer. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the crowded school board meeting room. Metal folding chairs scraped against linoleum as teachers, administrators, and union representatives settled in for what promised to be a contentious evening. Ethan sat near the back, his worn leather messenger bag at his feet, watching Maya stand confidently at the podium. The proposed reading intervention program would benefit our struggling students immensely, Maya explained, her voice steady and professional. She gestured to the charts projected on the screen behind her. The data from similar districts shows significant improvement in test scores, particularly among our most vulnerable populations. Ethan noticed how she tied her dark hair back neatly, wearing a crisp navy blazer that made her look every inch the composed administrator. But he caught the slight tremor in her hands as she shuffled her papers, a tale he remembered from their college days when she was nervous but trying not to show it. Mr. Patterson, the teachers' union representative, stood up abruptly. His face was flushed red above his striped tie. This program would require teachers to completely overhaul their existing lesson plans, he protested. It's an unnecessary burden on already overworked staff. The transition period would be gradual, Maya countered. We've budgeted for additional planning time and, of course you'd support this, Patterson interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. Just like you support certain teachers getting special treatment, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan felt his stomach clench as several heads turned in his direction. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Patterson, Maya said coolly, but this discussion is about helping our students succeed. Is that why Mr. Cole gets to run unauthorized tutoring sessions? Patterson shot back. Or why his student evaluations bypass normal channels? The school board chairman banged his gavel. Mr. Patterson, please stick to the agenda item at hand. But the damage was done. Whispers filled the room like angry wasps. Ethan watched Maya's shoulders stiffen as she tried to redirect the conversation back to the reading program. But the tension in the room had shifted irreversibly. The next morning, the gossip mill was running at full speed. Ethan arrived at school to find teachers falling silent as he passed. In the staff room, conversation stopped mid-sentence when he entered to get his coffee. By lunch, his email pinged with a message from an anonymous address. His hand shook slightly as he opened it. To school board members, administration subject, ethical concerns. It has come to my attention that Director Green has been showing favoritism to Mr. Cole and his student Liana Green. Sources confirm that Liana Green is Mr. Cole's biological daughter, making this a clear conflict of interest. Both parties have concealed this relationship from the administration. Ethan closed the email, his throat tight. Down the hall, he could hear the regular rhythm of classes continuing, but it felt like his world was suddenly spinning off its axis. Throughout the afternoon, he noticed more stares, more whispers. His usually engaged third-period class was distracted, students sneaking glances at their phones. One brave soul even raised her hand to ask, Mr. Cole, is it true what they're saying about you and Miss Green? Please focus on the lesson, he replied firmly, though his voice wanted to crack. During his planning period, he saw Maya hurrying down the hallway, her heels clicking rapidly against the floor as she headed toward an emergency administrative meeting. Their eyes met briefly, hers wide with worry, his filled with quiet resignation. The final bell had barely rung when his classroom phone buzzed. Mr. Cole, the secretary's voice was gentle but firm. Principal Roberts would like to see you in his office immediately. Ethan packed his bag slowly, his movements mechanical. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the classroom windows, and he paused to straighten a stack of essays he'd been planning to grade that evening. His hand lingered on Liana's paper at the top of the pile. Principal Roberts' office felt smaller than usual, with its dark wood paneling and heavy desk. The man himself sat with his hands folded, looking uncomfortable in his pinstripe suit. Ethan, please sit down. Roberts gestured to the chair across from him. I'm sure you know why you're here. Yes, Ethan said quietly. The email. It's not just the email. Roberts sighed heavily. We've received formal complaints about the tutoring arrangement, questions about grade inflation, concerns about professional boundaries. He shuffled through a stack of papers. Given the serious nature of these allegations and the apparent conflict of interest, we have no choice but to place you on administrative leave pending an investigation. The words hit Ethan like physical blows, but he kept his face neutral. I understand. You'll need to turn in your classroom keys, Roberts continued, not quite meeting his eyes. And we'll need you to refrain from contact with students, including Liana Green, until this matter is resolved. Ethan reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around his keyring. The metal felt warm from being carried close to his body all day. He carefully separated his classroom and supply closet keys from his personal ones, the small actions helping him maintain his composure. Your students will have a substitute starting tomorrow, Roberts added. We'll contact you when a knock at the door interrupted him. The secretary poked her head in, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, but the superintendent is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Roberts nodded, then turned back to Ethan. We'll be in touch. Please gather your personal belongings and, he hesitated, it would be best if you left through the side entrance. Ethan stood, placing his gond, keys carefully on the desk. They made a small, final-sounding clink against the polished wood. Without another word, he walked out of the office, his footsteps echoing in the nearly empty hallway. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, painting golden rectangles on the floor. In his classroom, Ethan methodically packed his personal items into his messenger bag, the photo of Liam from his desk, a few favorite books, the coffee mug his late wife had given him years ago. He deliberately left Liana's poem pinned to the bulletin board, a splash of hope amid the storm. As he walked toward the side entrance, he heard distant voices from the main office. Maya's measured tones mixed with others, all speaking in urgent whispers. He didn't slow down to listen. The metal door clicked shut behind him with a hollow finality, and he stepped out into the autumn afternoon, leaving behind the only place besides home where he'd felt he truly belonged. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the classroom windows as Ethan methodically packed his personal belongings into cardboard boxes. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee mug, a Father's Day gift from Liam, and wrapped it in yesterday's newspaper. The quiet rustling of paper seemed too loud in the empty room. A soft knock at the door made him look up. Sarah Martinez, one of his sophomore students, stood in the doorway with worried eyes. Mr. Cole, is it true? Are you really leaving? Ethan managed a gentle smile, though his heart felt heavy. Just temporarily, Sarah. Sometimes grown-ups need to sort things out. More students gathered in the hallway, whispering among themselves. Their concerned faces peered through the doorway like anxious birds. Tommy Chin, usually the class clown, stepped forward with uncharacteristic seriousness. But who's going to teach us about Shakespeare? Miss? Peterson just reads from the textbook. You'll be fine, Ethan assured them, carefully placing his worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird into the box. Sometimes life gives us unexpected lessons. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Liana pushed through the crowd, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She stood in the doorway, clutching her backpack straps so tightly her knuckles were white. This is my fault, she whispered, her voice cracking. I shouldn't have said anything. I shouldn't have... No, Ethan said firmly, crossing the room in quick strides. He stopped just short of reaching for her, painfully aware of the watching students. This isn't your fault, Liana. None of it. She shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. But if I hadn't told anyone, if I'd just kept quiet. Hey, he said softly, his teacher voice gentle but firm. The truth is never wrong. It's just complicated sometimes. Down the hall, Maya emerged from the administrative offices, her face drawn and tired. She caught sight of the gathering outside Ethan's classroom and quickly approached. The students parted like water around a stone. Liana, she called, her professional mask slipping slightly. Honey, we need to go. Liana turned to her mother, anger flashing through her tears. Are we running away again? Is that your answer to everything? Maya flinched as if struck. Several students shuffled uncomfortably, sensing the weight of private pain in this public moment. Not here, Maya said quietly. Please. Ethan cleared his throat. Everyone, thank you for your concern, but you should head home now. Your parents will be waiting. The students reluctantly dispersed, casting backward glances as they went. Only Liana remained, rooted to the spot, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I can't do this again, she whispered. I can't start over somewhere else. Not now. Maya reached for her daughter, but Liana stepped away, closer to Ethan. The movement wasn't lost on any of them. I have a meeting with the board tomorrow morning, Maya said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. They're reviewing my position, given the circumstances. Given that you kept my daughter from me for 15 years? Ethan's words came out sharper than intended, and he immediately regretted them as Liana flinched. Given everything, Maya finished quietly. "We might not have a choice about staying." Ethan turned back to his box, picking up his coffee mug again just to have something to do with his hands. "So you're running." Again. "I'm trying to protect my daughter. Our daughter," he corrected, still not looking at her. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Liana spoke, her voice small but steady. "I don't want protection. I want my family. Both of you." The bell rang, startling them all. The halls would soon be filled with students rushing to after-school activities and buses. Maya touched Liana's shoulder gently. "We need to go, sweetheart. Let Mr. Cole finish packing." This time, Liana allowed herself to be led away, but she stopped at the door. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at Ethan with eyes so like his own. "I'm so sorry." After they left, Ethan sat heavily in his desk chair, surrounded by half-packed boxes and 15 years of teaching memories. The afternoon light grew dimmer, shadows lengthening across the floor. He thought about Liam waiting at home, probably worried about why his dad had to leave work early. He thought about Liana, who'd finally found her father, only to lose him again. It took him nearly 2 hours to finish packing. By the time he carried the last box to his truck, the parking lot was empty, except for a few cars belonging to the janitorial staff. The box felt heavier than it should, weighted down with more than just books and papers. When he pulled into his driveway, the porch light was on. Liam always remembered to turn it on when it got dark. As Ethan stepped out of his truck, something white caught his eye. A piece of paper had been carefully placed under the welcome mat, just visible at the corners. His hand shook slightly as he pulled it free. The paper was college-ruled, torn from a spiral notebook, and covered in Liana's neat handwriting. He sat down on the porch steps to read it, the light from above casting just enough glow on the page. "Dear Mr. Cole, I don't know if I'm allowed to call you Dad yet. I'm sorry, everything got messed up. Mom says we might have to move again, but I don't want to. I just found you. It took me 15 years to find you. I used to make up stories about you. Sometimes you were a soldier or an astronaut or someone really important, but you're better than all those stories because you're real. You're just a regular dad who makes bad jokes and helps kids understand books and carries granola bars in your briefcase just in case someone's hungry. I know Mom's scared. She's always scared of something. But I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of not having a dad because everyone's too scared to tell the truth. Please don't give up on us. Please don't let them make you go away. Love, Liana P.S. I still have that granola bar you gave me on the first day. I'm keeping it forever." The porch light flickered, and Ethan realized he was crying. He carefully folded the letter and slipped it into his jacket pocket, next to his heart. Inside, he could hear Liam calling for him, probably wondering why he was sitting outside in the growing dark. He took a deep breath and stood up. Whatever happened tomorrow, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't giving up. Not this time. Not ever again. The bedside lamp cast a warm glow across Liam's dinosaur print bedspread as Ethan sat heavily on the edge of his son's empty bed. His fingers traced the edges of the pale blue envelope that had been waiting on his porch. The paper was slightly crumpled, as if it had been held tightly before being left behind. Liam was at a sleepover, and the house felt too quiet, too empty for what Ethan was about to read. He took a deep breath and carefully opened the envelope. Liana's neat handwriting filled the page, each word precise and thoughtful, just like her class assignments. "Dear Mr. Cole," the letter began. Ethan's heart clenched at the formality. Or maybe I should say Dad. I don't really know anymore. Ethan's vision blurred slightly as he continued reading. "Mom told me everything last night, about how young you both were in college, about how scared she was, and about why she left. She cried a lot while telling me. I've never seen her cry before. I want you to know that even before I knew for sure, I used to watch you with Liam at school pickup. The way you always listened to his stories, no matter how long they were. The way you carried his backpack when he was tired. I used to imagine what it would be like if you were my dad too. Then in class, you were always so patient with everyone, even kids who didn't try very hard. You made me feel smart when I thought I was stupid. You shared your granola bars when I was hungry, and you never made me feel bad about needing help. I've spent so many nights looking out my window, wondering about my father. Mom kept your old pictures in a box under her bed. Sometimes when she was at work, I'd look at them and try to find pieces of myself in your face. I think I have your eyes. And maybe your love for books too. I know everything's messed up right now because of me. The kids at school are talking, and the teachers look at me differently. Mom's really worried about her job. But please don't leave town. Please don't disappear like you did in all those old photos. I know I'm probably too old now for daddy-daughter dances or bedtime stories, but maybe we could still have other things. Maybe we could still read books together and talk about poetry. Maybe it's not too late for us to be some kind of family. I don't need everything to be perfect. I just need you to stay. Love, Liana. Ethan's hand shook as he folded the letter carefully and pressed it against his chest. The wall across from him held Liam's artwork, bright crayon drawings of their little family of two, always smiling, always together. But now, looking at those pictures, he saw empty spaces that could be filled. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, his fingers hovering over Maya's contact information. The screen blurred as tears finally spilled over. He thought about Liana waiting at the library yesterday, sitting alone with her textbooks and her hope. He thought about Maya, trying so hard to make things right after so many years of wrong. He thought about Liam, who had asked just last week if Liana could come over sometime because she draws cool dragons too, Dad. The phone rang 3 times before Maya answered. Ethan? Her voice was cautious, weighted with exhaustion. I read her letter, he said softly. Maya, we can't leave things like this. We can't let her down again. There was a long pause on the other end. The school board. We'll face them. Together, Ethan interrupted. Stay. Just. Stay a little longer. Give us a chance to figure this out. Not just for Liana, but for all of us. He heard Maya take a shaky breath. I've been looking at job listings in Portland, she admitted. I thought if we left quickly enough. Running didn't fix things 17 years ago, Ethan said gently. It won't fix things now. Another pause, longer this time. Then, what do you suggest? Ethan stood up, walking to Liam's desk where scattered crayons and paper lay waiting. He picked up a blue crayon, Liana's favorite color, he'd noticed during their tutoring sessions. There's a community forum next week, he said, pulling a clean sheet of paper toward him. The school board wants to address the situation publicly. Let me speak. Let me tell our story. Ethan, not the ugly parts, he assured her, but the truth about family, about second chances, about doing the right thing even when it's hard, about how sometimes the best lessons we teach our students aren't found in textbooks. He could hear the fear in Maya's voice when she spoke again. What if it's not enough? Then at least we tried, Ethan said firmly. At least Liana will know we fought for her, for our family. The word family hung in the air between them, full of possibility and terror and hope. Finally, Maya whispered, okay. After they hung up, Ethan sat at Liam's small desk, the blue crayon replaced with a pen. He began to write, the words coming slowly at first, then faster. Members of the school board, fellow educators, parents, and most importantly, our students. He paused, thinking of Liana's words about finding pieces of herself in his face, about hope and healing, and the chance to fill in the empty spaces in both their lives. Then he continued writing, pouring his heart onto the page, letting the truth light the way forward. The community center's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as people filed into the cramped meeting room. Every metal folding chair squeaked against the linoleum floor as concerned parents, teachers, and community members settled in. The air felt thick with tension and whispered conversations. Ethan stood at the back, his wrinkled speech notes trembling slightly in his hands. His blue tie felt too tight, and he tugged at it nervously. Liam sat in the front row next to Marvin, giving his father an encouraging thumbs up. Maya entered through the side door, looking elegant but tired in her navy blazer. She took a seat near the middle, her face a careful mask of professional composure. Liana slipped in behind her mother, her eyes finding Ethan's across the room. She offered a small, brave smile. The board president called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. We're here tonight to address recent concerns about, if I may, Ethan interrupted, stepping forward. His voice carried clearly through the packed room. I'd like to speak first. The board president hesitated, then nodded. The floor is yours, Mr. Cole. Ethan walked to the podium, his dress shoes clicking against the floor in the sudden silence. He placed his notes down but didn't look at them. Instead, he lifted his gaze to scan the familiar faces before him. 17 years ago, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I made a promise to my students. I told them that in my classroom, truth matters more than comfort, that facing hard realities takes more courage than hiding from them. He paused, swallowing hard. Tonight, I need to live up to that promise. The room grew still. Even the usual shuffling of papers and squeaking chairs ceased. Yes, Liana Green is my daughter. And no, I didn't know until recently. His eyes found her in the crowd. I missed 16 years of her life. I missed her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. I missed scraped knees and bedtime stories. I missed everything a father should be there for. Mrs. Thompson, a veteran board member in the front row, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Some of you might judge me for continuing to teach her class after finding out. Some might judge my agreeing for her past choices. He straightened his shoulders. But here's what I've learned as a teacher and a father. Life rarely gives us clean, simple answers. Sometimes the right path isn't the easy one. He gripped the edges of the podium. I've spent years teaching your children about redemption through literature, through characters who face their mistakes and try to make things right. Now I'm living that lesson. I'm asking for the chance to repair what was broken, not just for me, but for a teenage girl who deserves to know her father. The silence in the room felt electric. Ethan could see people leaning forward in their chairs, hanging on his words. I'm not asking you to forget policy or ignore proper procedure. I'm asking you to remember that behind every policy, every procedure, there are real people, real hearts, real lives. His voice grew softer, but no less intense. There's a young girl who wrote a poem about watching through windows, waiting for someone who wasn't there. There's a mother who carried a heavy secret, trying to protect everyone. There's a teacher who just wants to be the father he should have been all along. Mrs. Thompson was openly crying now, and she wasn't alone. Several other attendees were wiping their eyes. Maya and I have already begun the legal process to formally establish paternity. We're working with the school board's ethics committee to ensure everything moving forward is above board. He took a deep breath. But tonight, I'm standing here not as a teacher under review, but as a father who finally found his daughter. And I'm asking this community, my community, to help us heal instead of forcing us apart. The room erupted in applause. Someone in the back called out, "We're with you, Mr. Cole!" Ethan stepped back from the podium, his legs slightly shaky. As he made his way through the crowd, people reached out to pat his shoulder or squeeze his arm. Maya stood waiting at the edge of the gathering, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. The simple gesture spoke volumes about forgiveness, about moving forward, about hope. A woman in a press suit approached them, notebook in hand. "Mr. Cole, I'm Sarah Chin from the Valley Tribune. Would you be willing to give us a statement about tonight's events?" Ethan shook his head, his eyes finding Liana as she made her way toward them through the crowd. "No interview," he said quietly. This wasn't for the papers. This was for her. The reporter nodded respectfully and stepped away. Liana reached them then, and for the first time since the truth came out, she didn't hesitate to wrap her arms around Ethan in a tight hug. The surrounding conversations faded away as Ethan held his daughter, feeling the weight of secrets lifting from both their shoulders. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Harrison High School, casting long shadows across empty hallways. Ethan Cole sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching early arrivals trickle into the building. His weathered messenger bag lay on the passenger seat, stuffed with the same lesson plans and papers he'd carried for years. Yet today felt different. He took a deep breath, remembering the community forum 2 days ago. The words he'd spoken still echoed in his mind, raw and honest. Now it was time to face what came after truth, the ordinary moments that followed extraordinary revelations. Ethan grabbed his bag and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. As he approached the main entrance, he noticed a few students hurrying inside, casting quick glances his way before disappearing through the doors. His footsteps echoed in the quiet corridor as he made his way to his classroom. The first surprise came before he even reached his door. Colorful, construction paper covered nearly every inch of it, creating a patchwork of handwritten messages and drawings. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole," read one sign in bold letters. "We missed you," declared another, decorated with stick figures holding books. "Best teacher ever," proclaimed a third, surrounded by hand-drawn hearts. Ethan's throat tightened as he read message after message. Some were simple, "Glad you're back." Others went deeper, "Thank you for being real with us." He recognized the handwriting of students from all his classes, even some he'd taught in previous years. Inside his classroom, more signs decorated his desk. Someone had arranged his favorite pens in a smiley face pattern. A fresh apple sat beside a stack of cards. Ethan set down his bag and picked up one of the cards, his hands slightly trembling as he read the sincere words from his students. The first bell rang, startling him from his reverie. He quickly wiped his eyes and began writing the day's agenda on the whiteboard. trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Students started filing in, their usual morning chatter mixing with curious glances and warm smiles directed his way. "Mr. Cole," called out Jeremy from the back row. "Did you see our signs?" "Hard to miss them," Ethan replied with a gentle smile. "Thank you all. They mean a lot." As more students arrived, each class began with similar moments of acknowledgement. Nothing overdramatic, just simple gestures of support. Some students gave him quick hugs or fist bumps as they entered. Others simply nodded, understanding passing between them without words needed. Between second and third period, Ethan caught a glimpse of Liana in the hallway. She was standing by her locker, clutching her books to her chest. Their eyes met briefly, and she offered a small smile, tentative but genuine. He could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, processing everything that had happened, everything that was still changing. He smiled back, trying to convey without words that she could take all the time she needed. She ducked her head and continued to her next class, but her shoulders seemed lighter than before. The day proceeded with an almost surreal normalcy. Ethan taught Shakespearean sonnets to his freshman class, discussed themes of identity in The Great Gatsby with his juniors, and helped seniors polish their college application essays. He called on raised hands, wrote comments in margins, and maintained the steady rhythm of academic life. During fourth period, he noticed movement at his classroom door. Maya stood in the hallway, one hand resting lightly on the doorframe. She wore her usual professional attire, a navy blazer and pencil skirt, but her expression was softer than he'd ever seen it at school. She watched as he guided his students through a discussion of symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird, her lips curved in a gentle smile. Ethan continued teaching, aware of her presence, but focused on his students. He moved around the room, encouraging participation, drawing out quieter voices, creating the safe space for learning he'd always strived to maintain. This was who he was, not just Liana's newly discovered father or Maya's long-ago love, but Mr. Cole, the teacher who believed in the power of stories to change lives. "Remember," he told his class as they discussed Scout's gradual understanding of her father, "sometimes the most important lessons come from seeing people as they truly are, not as we first assumed them to be." Several students nodded thoughtfully, and Ethan caught a few casting knowing glances his way. They were learning far more than literature this semester. Maya remained at the door, her smile deepening as she watched the natural way he connected with his students. The tension that had marked their every interaction since her return seemed to have softened into something else. Not quite comfort yet, but perhaps understanding. When the bell rang, students gathered their things, several pausing to welcome him back once more before heading out. Through it all, Ethan maintained his usual calm demeanor, though his heart felt full to bursting with their simple acts of acceptance and support. He turned to erase the whiteboard, maintaining the routine he'd followed for years. This was how healing would happen, not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the quiet return to daily rhythms, in the steady work of teaching and learning, in the gentle reconstruction of trust and connection. Through all these ordinary moments, something extraordinary was happening. The truth, once spoken, was settling into place like dust after a storm, allowing everyone to see more clearly where they stood and how to move forward. Maya still watched from the doorway, her soft smile saying more than words could express. This was their new normal, complicated, imperfect, but honest at last. And somehow, in the simple act of teaching at his class, as if nothing had changed, everything had. The late September sun cast a warm glow over Maya's modest backyard. Potted flowers lined the small concrete patio, and a few raised vegetable beds showed signs of careful tending. Ethan stood at the wooden gate, his hand hesitating on the latch. Through the slats, he could see Maya kneeling in her garden, working quietly among the plants. He took a deep breath and opened the gate. The hinges creaked softly, causing Maya to look up. She brushed dirt from her hands and stood, smoothing her old jeans. "You came?" she said softly, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I said I would." Ethan's voice was steady, though his heart wasn't. Maya gestured to two weathered Adirondack chairs near the vegetable beds. They sat down, the wooden chairs creaking under their weight. The garden smelled of earth and late-blooming flowers, with butterflies dancing between the plants. "The tomatoes look good," Ethan said, nodding toward the calm, raised bed. "Liana helps me with them. She has a green thumb." Maya's hands twisted in her lap. "I think she gets that from you. Remember that herb garden you had in college?" "On the fire escape," Ethan said, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "The superintendent kept threatening to make me take it down." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. A wind chime tinkled softly from the back porch. "Ethan," Maya began, her voice thick with emotion, "I know I've said it before, but I'm so sorry. Every day for 17 years, I've carried this weight." "Maya," Ethan started to interrupt, but she held up her hand. "Please, let me finish." She took a shaky breath. "I was young and scared and completely wrong. I convinced myself I was protecting you, that I was doing the right thing, but I was just protecting myself from facing my own fears." Ethan leaned forward in his chair, elbows on his knees. "I won't lie to you, Maya. There's still anger there. When I think about all the firsts, I missed her first steps, first words, first day of school." His voice cracked slightly. "Those moments are gone forever." Maya wiped a tear from her cheek. "I know, and I can't give those back to you." "No, you can't." Ethan's words were soft but firm. He looked out across the small garden, watching a butterfly land on a bright purple coneflower. "But you know what I've learned? Anger is heavy. It weighs you down, keeps you stuck, and I've spent too many years being stuck." He turned to face Maya directly. "These past few weeks, getting to know Liana, she's amazing, Maya. She's thoughtful and kind and so much smarter than she gives herself credit for. You did that. You raised her to be wonderful." "She's always been more like you than me," Maya admitted. "The way she loses herself in books, how she thinks so deeply about everything. I used to watch her and see you in every gesture." Ethan stood up, walking over to the tomato plants. He touched one of the leaves gently. "I'm still angry," he said, "but I'm choosing to let love be stronger than resentment. Liana deserves that. We all do." Maya joined him by the vegetable bed. "She talks about you all the time now, about your tutoring sessions, the way you explain things. She's different, lighter somehow." "I see him in her too," Ethan said quietly. Maya looked puzzled. "Who?" "My dad. The way she furrows her brow when she's concentrating, it's exactly like him." He smiled sadly. He would have adored her. From inside the house came the sound of a door closing. They both turned to see Liana step onto the back porch, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing one of her oversized sweaters despite the warm day. She hesitated at the top of the steps, looking uncertain. "Mom? Mr. Cole? Is everything okay?" Ethan glanced at Maya, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He walked toward the porch steps, his heart pounding. When he reached them, he knelt down so he was looking up at Liana. "Everything's okay," he said gently, "but I'd like to ask you something important, if that's all right." Liana nodded, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I know this has all been complicated and confusing," Ethan continued, his voice soft but clear. "And I know I've missed so much time I wish more than anything I could get back. But I'm here now, and I'd like to be part of your life. Formally, really be your dad, if you'll let me." Liana's eyes filled with tears. For a moment that felt like eternity. She stood completely still. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Yes." The word was simple, but it changed everything. Liana took a step forward, and Ethan opened his arms. She fell into them, burying her face in his shoulder as tears fell freely. Maya watched from the garden, her own cheeks wet, as father and daughter began to bridge the gap of 17 years with a simple, healing embrace. The aroma of lasagna filled Ethan's small kitchen as he pulled the steaming dish from the oven. His hands trembled slightly as he set it on the wooden trivet, and he wiped them nervously on his apron. The doorbell chimed, making him jump. "I'll get it," Liam called out, his sock-covered feet sliding across the hardwood floor. He yanked open the front door, revealing Maya and Liana standing on the porch, both holding covered dishes. "Hi," Liam beamed. "Dad's in the kitchen. He's been cooking all afternoon." Maya smiled warmly. "That's very sweet of him." She handed Liam a container. "These are chocolate chip cookies. Would you mind taking them to the kitchen?" Liana stood quietly beside her mother, clutching a glass bowl of salad. Her eyes darted around the living room, taking in the mismatched furniture and the wall covered with Liam's artwork. "Come on in." Ethan called from the kitchen. "Everything's almost ready." The house felt different with 4 people in it. Fuller, livelier, Liam chatted nonstop as he helped set the table, telling Liana about his latest art project and his favorite comic books. She nodded along, slowly relaxing as his enthusiasm proved infectious. "Do you like to draw too?" Liam asked, pulling out a chair for her. "Sometimes," Liana replied softly. "I prefer writing though, like Dad. He writes poetry sometimes, but he thinks I don't know about it." Ethan cleared his throat, his cheeks reddening as he carried the lasagna to the table. "Thank you for that revelation, buddy." Maya laughed, a genuine, warm sound that made Ethan's heart skip. It had been so long since he'd heard that laugh. "You still write poetry? I remember finding your notebooks in college." "Just occasionally," he mumbled, but he was smiling too. They settled around the table, passing dishes back and forth. The first few minutes were quiet, except for the clink of forks against plates and murmured requests to pass the garlic bread. But then Liam, bless his heart, broke the ice. "Hey, Leanna, want to see my card trick after dinner? Dad got me this really cool magic set for my birthday." Leanna's eyes lit up. "Really? I used to do magic tricks too, when I was younger." "No way! Can you teach me some?" The conversation flowed easier after that. Maya complimented the lasagna, and Ethan admitted he'd used his late wife's recipe. There was a moment of silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable, just respectful. "She was an amazing cook," Ethan said softly. "She would have loved having a full table again." Maya reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "Thank you for having us, Ethan." As dinner wound down, Liam practically dragged Liana to the living room, where he'd already set up his cards on the coffee table. Their laughter drifted back to the kitchen as Ethan and Maya cleared the dishes. "He's such a wonderful boy," Maya said, rinsing a plate. "You've done an incredible job with him." Ethan loaded the dishwasher, thinking carefully before responding. "He makes it easy. He's got such a big heart." He paused. "Like Liana. She's amazing, Maya. You should be proud." "I am." Maya's voice cracked slightly. "But I wish." "I know." Ethan handed her a dish towel to dry her hands. "But we're here now." From the living room came a burst of delighted laughter. Liana was showing Liam how to make a card disappear, her earlier shyness forgotten. They watched their children together, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Remember when we used to play cards in the student union?" Maya asked quietly. "You always won at poker," Ethan chuckled. "Those poor freshmen never knew what hit them." "Well, you were terrible at bluffing. Still are, actually." Their eyes met, and for a moment, they were 20 again, full of dreams and possibilities. But they weren't those people anymore. They were parents, with battle scars and wisdom earned the hard way. "Mom," Leanna called out, "come see what Liam taught me." They joined their children in the living room, settling on the worn couch while Liam and Liana performed increasingly elaborate card tricks. Some worked, some failed spectacularly, but the laughter never stopped. As the evening drew to a close, Maya helped Liana gather their things. The kids had exchanged phone numbers, already planning more magic shows and trading book recommendations. At the front door, Maya lingered, her hand on the doorframe. The porch light cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the mix of emotions there: gratitude, nostalgia, hope, and maybe a touch of regret. Ethan stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "You're welcome anytime," he said simply. Maya nodded, understanding all the words that remained unspoken. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as parents and students filed into their seats. Ethan fidgeted with his tie, scanning the crowd. Maya appeared beside him, elegant in a navy dress, holding a bouquet of yellow roses. "Those are beautiful," he said softly. "They were her grandmother's favorite." Maya replied, settling into the seat next to him. "I can't believe she wouldn't let us see any rehearsals." Ethan smiled, remembering how secretive Liana had been about her piece. For weeks, she'd practiced behind closed doors, shushing anyone who came near. Even in his English class, she'd kept the paper turned away from him while working on it. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. The drama teacher, Mrs. Patterson, stepped onto the stage in a flowing black dress. "Welcome to our annual spring showcase," she announced, her voice warm and proud. "Tonight, our students will share original pieces they've written and performed themselves." Ethan's heart raced as the performances began. A boy performed a comedic piece about his first job at the grocery store. Two girls acted out a scene about friendship, but his thoughts kept drifting to Liana backstage. During intermission, Maya touched his arm. "You okay?" "Just nervous for her," he admitted. "She's so shy usually." "She gets that from you," Maya said with a small laugh. "Remember how you used to hide in the library before giving presentations in college?" The memory made him chuckle. "I wasn't hiding, I was preparing." The lights flickered, signaling the end of intermission. As everyone settled back in their seats, Ethan noticed Liam a few rows ahead with his best friend's family, who'd agreed to watch him during the show. Mrs. Patterson returned to the stage. Our next performer is Liana Green, with an original monologue titled Invisible Girl. Ethan sat up straighter as Liana walked onto the stage. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back with a silver clip that caught the stage lights. She looked so young and vulnerable under the spotlight, but her chin was held high. She took a deep breath, and her clear voice filled the space. There was a girl who lived in reflections, always seeing herself through other people's eyes. She moved, like a shadow through hallways and streets, carrying questions too heavy for her backpack. Who am I? Where do I belong? Why does half of my heart feel missing? Maya's hand found Ethan's and squeezed tight. He could barely breathe as Liana continued, her voice growing stronger with each line. Then one day, a man with kind eyes saw past her silence, past her walls. He didn't just teach her about books and words. He taught her that she was worth seeing, worth knowing, worth waiting for. He showed her that sometimes the best stories are the ones we're too afraid to tell. Tears pricked at Ethan's eyes. On stage, Liana's voice trembled slightly, but her gaze remained steady. This is for the man who saw me when I didn't even see myself, who gave me back the missing pieces of a story I thought was lost forever, who showed me that family isn't just blood, it's also choice and time and love. And sometimes it's finding what was there all along. Maya was openly crying now, her fingers still intertwined with Ethan's. He could feel his own tears rolling down his cheeks, but he couldn't take his eyes off his daughter, their daughter, as she delivered her final lines. I am no longer the invisible girl. I am seen. I am known. I am loved. And that makes all the difference. The audience erupted in applause. Ethan and Maya stood, clapping until their hands hurt. Liana's face broke into a radiant smile, and she gave a small bow before hurrying off stage. After the final performance, they waited in the lobby among the crowd of proud parents and excited students. Liam had joined them, bouncing on his toes as he looked for his sister. There she is, he called out, pointing. Liana emerged from the backstage door, still in her black dress, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She spotted them and rushed over, throwing her arms around both Maya and Ethan at once. You were amazing, sweetheart, Maya said, pressing the roses into her hands. Liana buried her face in the flowers, then looked up at Ethan with shining eyes. Did you like it, Dad? The word hung in the air for a moment. Simple and profound. Ethan's heart swelled as he pulled her close again, his voice thick with emotion. I loved it. I'm so proud of you. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of First Community Church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Ethan Cole straightened his blue tie and glanced at Liam, who sat beside him in a crisp button-down shirt that still had the creases from its packaging. On Liam's other side, Liana smoothed her floral dress nervously, while Maya sat at the end, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. They'd arrived early, and Ethan could feel the curious glances from the regular church members as they filed in. Mrs. Henderson, who'd taught Sunday school for 30 years, paused at their pew with a warm smile. Ethan, it's wonderful to see you here with your family, she said, her eyes twinkling as she looked at all 4 of them. The word family made Liana sit up straighter, a small smile playing at her lips. The organ music swelled, and Pastor Delaney stepped up to the pulpit. His kind face surveyed the congregation, and he nodded slightly when his eyes met Ethan's. The pastor had known about their situation. Ethan had sought his counsel during those difficult first weeks after discovering Liana was his daughter. Today, Pastor Delaney began, his voice gentle but carrying to every corner of the sanctuary. We're going to talk about second chances. Ethan felt Maya stiffen slightly beside Liana. He watched as their daughter reached over and took her mother's hand. In John 8-7, the pastor continued, Jesus says, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." It's a powerful reminder that none of us is perfect, and all of us deserve the opportunity for redemption. The sermon wove together stories of biblical figures who had received second chances. Peter's denial and redemption. Paul's transformation from persecutor to apostle. But Pastor Delaney also shared modern examples, speaking of broken relationships restored and families reunited. God's timing isn't always our timing, he said, his words seeming to echo in the hushed sanctuary. Sometimes what we see as an ending is actually a beginning. Sometimes what we think is too late is actually right on time. Liam, who had been fidgeting with his Bible, suddenly went still. He looked up at his father, then passed him to Maya and Liana. Even at 10, he seemed to understand the weight of the message. As the sermon continued, Other church members kept stealing glances at their pew. But unlike the suspicious looks at school weeks ago, these faces held warmth and acceptance. Mrs. Mitchell, the choir director, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mr. Rodriguez, who ran the food bank, nodded encouragingly whenever he caught Ethan's eye. When the service ended, the usual shuffle of people heading for the exit slowed as members of the congregation approached their pew. Miss Sarah, who worked at the library where Ethan had tutored Liana, was the first to reach them. "Maya, Liana, we're so happy to have you here," she said, her face glowing with sincerity. "Liana, I hope you'll consider joining our youth group. We meet on Wednesday nights, and we could use another creative writer for our newsletter." Liana's eyes lit up. "Really? I'd like that." More people came forward. Mrs. Cooper invited Maya to join the women's book club. Mr. Wilson, who coached Little League, told Liam and Liana about the church softball team that would be starting in the spring. Each interaction was natural, welcoming, free of judgment. The children were drawn into a group of kids their age, leaving Ethan and Maya standing together near the back of the sanctuary. Pastor Delaney approached them, his eyes kind. "God has a way of bringing things full circle," he said quietly. "Sometimes the longest roads lead us right back where we need to be." Maya's eyes glistened. "Thank you for making us feel welcome," she whispered. "This is your home too," the pastor replied. "All of you." As they gathered their things to leave, the morning sun had risen higher, streaming through the windows in bright shafts of light. Liam and Liana walked ahead, already deep in conversation about youth group activities. Maya followed, stopping to speak with Mrs. Henderson about the book club. Ethan paused at the church door, looking back at the sanctuary. The rainbow lights from the stained glass still danced across the pews where they'd sat. He thought about all the Sundays he'd spent here alone with Liam after his wife passed. The comfort he'd found in these walls, the strength that had given him to keep going. Now, watching his expanded family walk toward the parking lot, seeing the way Liana's hair caught the sunlight just like her mother's, hearing Liam's laugh mix with his sister's, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He looked up at the clear blue sky, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early autumn. "Thank you," he whispered, his words carried away on the wind. The words were simple, but they held everything. Thanks for second chances, for healing, for the mysterious ways life could bring people back together. Thanks for the grace to forgive, the strength to rebuild, and the love that could bridge even the widest gaps. The June afternoon blazed golden and warm, casting dappled shadows through the maple trees in Ethan Cole's backyard. The sweet scent of barbecue smoke drifted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and cheerful conversation. Checkered tablecloths fluttered in the gentle breeze, weighted down by paper plates, plastic cups, and bowls of potato salad and coleslaw. Ethan stood at the grill, spatula in hand, watching hamburgers sizzle. His cotton shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, and a light sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. Maya approached, carrying a fresh plate of uncooked hot dogs. "The natives are getting restless," she said with a smile, nodding toward the crowd of hungry teenagers sprawled across the lawn. "I think Mr. Harrison's about to start gnawing on the paper plates." Ethan chuckled. "Tell him to hold his horses. These burgers need another minute." Maya lingered beside him, arranging the hot dogs on the spare corner of the grill. "Remember when we used to cook ramen noodles in your dorm room? On that illegal hot plate?" Ethan grinned. "I'm surprised we never burned the building down." Across the yard, Liana sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket with Liam and several other students, dealing cards for what appeared to be an intense game of Uno. Her laugh carried across the yard, bright and uninhibited, so different from the quiet girl who'd first walked into his classroom 9 months ago. Principal Stevens made his way through the crowd, stopping to chat with parents and teachers. When he reached the grill, he clasped Ethan's shoulder warmly. "Cole, got a minute?" Ethan handed the spatula to Maya. "Don't let them burn?" She raised an eyebrow. "I think I can handle it. I did manage to keep a child alive for 15 years. Ethan followed Stevens to a quiet spot near the garden beds, where spring flowers were giving way to early summer blooms. The principal's expression was serious but pleased. "The school board approved the new student mentorship program," Stevens said. "Full funding, starting next semester. We want you to run it." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Me? After everything that happened this year? Well, you've shown exactly the kind of leadership we need. The way you handled the whole situation, how you kept your dignity, and put the students first." Stevens shook his head admiringly. "Plus, your test scores are through the roof, and that poetry program you started has kids actually excited about literature." "I don't know what to say," Ethan admitted. Say, yes, you'll keep teaching your regular classes, but you'll also coordinate with other teachers, train peer mentors, work with at-risk students. It comes with a decent raise, too. Before Ethan could respond, a commotion erupted from the Uno game. Liam had apparently just dropped a draw 4 card, causing dramatic groans from his opponents. Think about it, Steven said. Let me know by next week. Back at the grill, Maya was successfully managing the food situation, expertly flipping burgers while fielding requests from hungry guests. Miss Calloway, who had become one of their strongest supporters after the truth came out, was helping to organize the buffet line. So? Maya asked as Ethan rejoined her. What did Stevens want? They're starting that mentorship program we talked about. He offered me the coordinator position. Maya's eyes lit up. Ethan, that's perfect for you. You're already everyone's unofficial mentor anyway. Yeah, but he hesitated, watching Liana laugh at something Liam had said. It'll mean longer hours sometimes. And you're worried about having enough time for the kids? Maya guessed. When he nodded, she touched his arm gently. You know, being a good father doesn't mean being available every second. It means showing them how to live with purpose, how to make a difference. Besides, she added with a smirk, I happen to be an excellent co-parent. The afternoon wore on, golden lights softening into the warm hues of early evening. Parents chatted in clusters while kids played frisbee on the lawn. Marvin, Ethan's veteran friend, had set up his guitar and was teaching a group of students some old folk songs. Liana approached the grill, where Ethan was cleaning up. She'd grown taller over the year, more confident in her movements. The shy, uncertain girl had bloomed into someone who walked with her head high, who raised her hand in class, who wrote poetry that made people cry. Need help, Dad? The word still made his heart skip. Sure, kiddo. Want to pack up these condiments? They worked together in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of quiet that comes from trust rather than fear. Then Liana spoke softly. You know what I was thinking about? What's that? That first day you offered to tutor me. I was so scared you'd say no. She closed the lid on a container of pickles. I didn't know then that you'd turn out to be my father. I just knew you seemed kind, like someone who might actually care if I succeeded or failed. Ethan had to swallow hard before he could speak. I did care. I do care. I know. Liana straightened up, looking at him directly. The setting sun caught her eyes, Maya's eyes, and made them shine. It's been the best year of my life. Ethan pulled her into a hug, holding her close as the summer evening wrapped around them. Over her shoulder, he could see Maya watching them, her expression soft with love and maybe a hint of remembered regret. But regret was part of their story, too, part of what had brought them here to this moment. The yard was full of people who had become more than just a school community. They were family now, bound together by choice and circumstance and forgiveness. Liam was teaching some younger kids a card trick. Marvin was leading a chorus of This Land is Your Land. Miss Calloway was sharing her famous chocolate chip cookies. And here was Liana, his daughter, strong and whole and healing, hugging him like she never wanted to let go, like she finally knew she would never have to. The crickets chirped their evening song as darkness settled over the neighborhood. On Ethan's front porch, the old swing creaked gently back and forth, holding both him and Maya as they watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The day's celebration had wound down, leaving behind only the comfortable quiet of a summer night and the distant sound of their children's laughter from inside the house. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, though. The evening wasn't cold. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, she said softly, that all of this will disappear like a dream. Ethan turned to look at her, his expression gentle. The porch light cast a warm glow on her face, highlighting the slight worry lines around her eyes, lines that hadn't been there in college. It's real, he assured her, all of it. Through the living room window, they could hear Liam's excited voice explaining the rules of Monopoly to Liana, followed by his sister's playful protest about his creative interpretation of the banking system. The sound made both parents smile. They're good together? Maya observed, her voice thick with emotion. I worried so much about how Liana would adjust, but Liam, she shook her head in wonder. He's got a big heart, Ethan said proudly. Just like his mom did. He paused, then added, Sarah would have loved Liana too. Maya's eyes softened at the mention of Ethan's late wife. Tell me about her again? She was a special education teacher, Ethan said, his voice warm with memories. She could see straight through to anyone's heart. When she got sick, he swallowed hard. She made me promise to keep my heart open. I didn't understand what she meant until now. The swing creaked as Maya shifted. I've been running for so long, she admitted. From my mistakes, from the guilt, she gestured between them, from everything we could have been. Inside, they heard Liana laugh, a pure, unguarded sound that made Maya's eyes water. I robbed her of so much, she whispered. Robbed you both. Ethan was quiet for a moment, listening to the nighttime sounds around them. A car passed on the street, its headlights briefly illuminating the garden where earlier that day, friends and family had gathered to celebrate new beginnings. We can't change the past, he said finally, but we're here now. No more secrets between us, no more running. Maya nodded, wiping at her eyes. The school board meeting next week. They're going to officially reinstate you as head of the new mentorship program. I know, Ethan smiled. Principal Roberts called this morning, said something about how the community needs more examples of grace and second chances. You deserve it, Maya said firmly. The way you handled everything, the speech at the forum, you showed everyone what real strength looks like. From inside came the sound of Liam's theatrical groan, followed by Liana's triumphant declaration that she'd just bought Boardwalk. Their happiness filtered through the window screen like music. I've been thinking, Maya said carefully, about staying. Permanently. The school board has offered to extend my contract for another 3 years. Liana's grades have never been better, and she's talking about joining the drama club next year. Ethan's hand found the edge of the swing between them, his fingers just inches from Maya's. The house next door is for sale, he mentioned casually. 3 bedrooms, nice yard, walking distance to both schools. Maya's breath caught. You've been looking? Just noticed the sign. He said, though his slight smile suggested otherwise. Thought you might want to know, for Liana's sake, of course. Of course, Maya echoed, her own smile growing. For Liana. The screen door squeaked, and Liam's head poked out. Dad, Liana's totally cheating at Monopoly. Am not, came the indignant reply from inside. Just because you don't understand sophisticated business strategies. She's hiding property cards under the board. Ethan chuckled. We'll be right there to mediate, he called back. Liam disappeared with a huff, the door banging shut behind him. Maya shook her head, laughing softly. Sophisticated business strategies? She definitely gets that from your side of the family. Oh, I seem to remember someone running quite the lucrative underground homework review service in college. Ethan teased. That was totally legitimate. Tutoring. And the fact that you only accepted payment in chocolate chip cookies was just coincidence? Their shared laughter felt natural, healing, like finding an old favorite song and remembering all the words. The swing rocked gently as their mirth subsided into comfortable silence. We should probably go referee that game before it turns into a hostile takeover, Maya said, but she made no move to get up. Probably, Ethan agreed. Equally still, the night air was sweet with the scent of Maya's garden flowers, planted that afternoon in pots along the porch rails. Her contribution to what she'd called making the place feel more like home. The gesture hadn't been lost on Ethan. No more secrets. Maya repeated his earlier words like a promise. No more running. No more empty houses. Ethan added softly. No more waiting by windows. A particularly loud protest from inside made them both smile. Their children's voices blended together in the warm evening air, a harmony neither of them had dared to dream of months ago. Ethan looked at Maya, really looked at her, saw the girl he'd loved in college, the woman who'd carried their secret for so long, and the person she was becoming now, brave enough to stay and face both the past and the future. His hand moved those last few inches across the swing until his fingers found hers. We've both been lost a long time, he said quietly, but I think we're home now. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.